Hey everyone, this is TN Politics with Maya, and we have a great leader today joining us for another episode on a podcast where we dig deeper in power and empowerment, leadership, the EU bubble, women in leadership, and many, many other exciting topics, which today will also be sprinkled with a lot of art. You are the first leader who is coming from the place of arts and culture, and I'm very glad to welcome today Ása Richardsdóttir, and I'm trying really hard to not mess this up.
Very good.
Ása is the Secretary General of IETM, which is a great network, and I was very lucky to meet you 2 weeks ago in Varna. Is it already 2 weeks ago?
I think it's even more. It's like going on 4 weeks, isn't it?
4 weeks. Okay, well, time flies. Time flies. We met during a very interesting, you were doing a study visit in Bulgaria. And of course, you saved the best place for desserts, which was Varna. And it was really interesting to see how network, again, from the EU bubble, but with the cultural mindset, with sustainable development mindset, functions on the grassroots level. So I was really excited to talk to you, and now I'm very happy to talk to you in my home as well. So welcome, Ása.
Very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Maya.
Well, let's start from the start. The first question is always the same. How did you end up here? And by here, I don't mean my house, but how did you end up in Brussels being the SecGen of this amazing network?
Well, the short answer is that I applied for the job and got it. But the longer answer is that I have been working in the performing arts for 30 years. And ITM is the international network for contemporary performing arts. And I myself entered the performing arts in 1994 by being asked to create an independent theatre venue.
Okay.
That was my start. And that's a little bit been one of the threads in my life, is that I have very often, with my friends and colleagues, created something new, created something that didn't exist, developed concepts which then lead to something, often working internationally, almost always working internationally. So that's how I then ended up applying for this job, by having worked in the performing arts for a very long time, and in particularly since 2000, when I actually organized an IETM meeting in Reykjavík, Iceland, where I come from. And from then on, I have been working for organizations, ventures, festival platforms which have an international focus.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a, you could say, a natural development to apply for a job like that. I have been running my operation from Reykjavík, and I felt it was time to perhaps go and live somewhere else. That was one urge that I had. I hadn't been living abroad since my studies. So it was quite a natural development to apply for the job when it was advertised, and I was lucky enough to get it.
I'm sure it's something much more than luck. And you mentioned your studies. What did you study and where did you study?
I have 3 university degrees. I did a bachelor degree in United Kingdom in international relations and politics. Then I did a diploma in arts management, and then I did an international MBA degree.
Mm-hmm. MBAs always help. I'm also a proud holder of an MBA, and it puts a lot of things in the right places. But I want to go back to your bachelor, because I think it's really interesting that so you started with political filter through your education in a way in international relations.
Yeah, I'm raised in a very political family. Several of my forefathers have been involved in politics, and my father was a politician. There was always a very political dialogue going on around the table.
Mm-hmm.
But the entry point into politics was very close to me, and I actually was a politician as well. I can go into that in a little while. was always from an international perspective, because since I was a very little kid, I was always fascinated by the world. I could sit with the globe that was in my house for hours and search for countries and ask my mom and dad, what is this place and what does it look like? And then when they couldn't answer because they hadn't been there, I got frustrated. So it was very much a fascination of mine to kind of go and explore the world, which I have had the good fortune to do, but also look at it as one place. And that was always sort of, I always felt like this is where I belong. I belong to this planet. And although I'm born in my country, which I dearly love, I always had this urge to see what other people in the world were doing, how they behaved, what was their passion, what was their desire. So I went as an exchange student to a tiny little town in Colorado when I was 16, where I acquired a second family in my life that has been my second family ever since, and are very, very dear to me. And it was really in Colorado that I started putting the puzzles together about, this is where I want to work. I want to work internationally. I want to work for the benefit of the many, which will benefit my own country as well, I hoped. And then I started putting the puzzle together with my second passion in life, which is the arts. I used to sing a lot as a child, and I actually studied singing as well. And I had this idea of becoming a singer at some point in my life. When I felt I would never be Maria Callas, I decided to turn my attention somewhere else.
So it was a higher purpose then.
Yeah, I have always had rather sort of ambitious plans. Kind of, I don't know where that comes from. But I still have really found a way of joining my two passions, my passion for world peace, if you like, for world affairs and the arts, in my work as working internationally for the performing arts. So I kind of very early on found the place I wanted to be, but I've also had the good fortune to be able to deviate a little bit from that. So, for example, when I was 20 years old and finished my high school degree, I decided to take a year off, and I decided I'm going to work in the media. I'm going to see how the media looks like. And I found two job advertisements. One was a journalist in the main morning paper in Iceland, and one was a position called assistant producer in the Icelandic television. I had no idea what that was, but I decided to apply for it, and I got it. And
was it luck again?
Yes, and this led me to having the Icelandic State Television as my second home in a way for 6 years in my life. And I was very, very lucky to meet both wonderful people and learn a lot about how to work, working skills, working under pressure, meeting deadlines, and understanding the higher purpose of journalism and media, because that is where I think is the role of journalism and media. It isn't always that today, but that's where I kind of found an outlet for my passion to tell the audience actually what was happening in the world. And I ended up being a television reporter for the last 2 years of these 6 years. So I got to try different sides of working in television. So the media was one area where I really have enjoyed working. And then my political nose brought me into politics also early on. Actually, the same year as I started the Coffee Theatre in Reykjavík, I entered the Women's Alliance, which was a female-only political party, putting female issues and topics like, sexual abuse or women's liberations and women's place in the work market and so on and so forth on the political agenda in Iceland and really made a huge difference.
Oh, I wish we had that type of party in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
I really wish, yeah.
It was a really an astonishing time in Icelandic politics, which the influence of the women's alliance still lingers there, because they really were agenda setters.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on, I have been part of a political movement in Iceland, and I did a 4-year stint as a city councillor, actually before I moved to Brussels.
Nice.
So
nice.
basically, to round up, the arts, the international politics and media has been my arena, with a tiny little, very strange but interesting stunt in banking, which happened.
How did you do banking? Where in between Colorado, not Maria Callas, and being a city council in Reykjavík, how did you manage to do banking?
Well, that's what happened when your country goes bankrupt. A lot of things can happen.
Motivation finds you?
No, it was, instead, I'll give you the short version of it. It's actually quite an interesting story how it all happened. Because as you know, Iceland went bankrupt in 2008. Literally did go bankrupt. But then the International Monetary Fund decided to save us. And all the banks that really were the root of the problems, they were closed down. So they were literally put to rest and put into resolution committees, so-called, overnight in October 2008. And the national assets and the national loans and the national bank accounts of the Icelandic nation were put to a side and established in new banks. And this was all in the lap of the government. So the government had to overnight take care of this. And then they started, okay, who are we going to get to be on the boards of these banks? And we cannot go to the usual suspects because they are all, you know, a little dubious characters. We don't know who did wrong and who did not and all these things. And so they had to, go search for people. And there was one night where they were, the Minister of Finance and his assistant were sitting and they were going through the list of people. But they were also appointing people that they knew would be sort of affiliated with them. So it was a political appointment. And my name came up, and it came up because didn't Ása write this series of articles last year that was really interesting about corporate responsibility and the role of the private sector towards the art? Yeah, that was an interesting one. Let's call her. And that's how it happened. And
wow.
I was actually in Zurich, of all places, the bank city of Europe.
Wow.
When I got the call at an ITM meeting. And the call went like, Ása, yes, this is Jón Þór Sturluson, the Assistant Minister of Finance. Are you willing to go on one of the boards of the banks? What? I don't have a lot of time. Are you willing to go on one of the boards of the banks? Yeah, I mean, what don't you do for your country? And I'm like, okay, fine. And then I just sort of, which one? I don't know. I'll let you know.
Wow, okay.
So
banking as well.
This ended up being a 2-year stint of being on a board of a bank.
I think that this mix that you just described is, by the way, something that I really like to find out. And this is why I start with this question. This is always why I ask this question, because I've never met somebody in leadership who is actually worth their position to just have a story of, I studied, I was a manager, then I was a director, then I was a leader. I've never met somebody like that. It's always like the most random mix of different things, a formula that you would never plan, that really mixes in your brain and shapes you. And that's how you end up in the position of a leader, at least in my opinion. I think that I spoke with, what's her name? It was recently, a bit after we met. And I was discussing what I was doing during the week. And I said, well, this week in Bulgaria, I did a training on women and poverty. in the poorest region of Bulgaria, which is Montana. Then I went and I worked with an international organization of performing arts for trying to get a space from the port of Varna so it can become a cultural venue for performing arts. Then I did a social enterprises conference.
You are more
but no, I mean,
everywhere, Maya, than I have ever been.
No, banking singer, and I'm not there yet, but that's what I mean. The ability for somebody to open up to the world and receive and then give back. I think this is an ongoing process, and that's how you shape proper, good, value-based leaders, in my opinion. Like that curiosity that pinches you, because like, why would you go to a board of a banking?
Never. I would never have imagined that it would happen, and probably would never have happened if it hadn't been for this very unique situation back in Reykjavík. So that's sort of, but I also find that this experience that I have had the good fortune to gain in my life have, as you put it, made me a stronger leader, because I have a very versatile experience. Mm-hmm. And what I feel is the most valuable thing that I have now in my current position, because I have been a politician, because I've been in the media, because I had a brief stint in banking, I have a deeper understanding, I find, than many about the positions of these people. Mm-hmm. I am able to speak the language of the politicians, I find, in a better way than I was before I entered politics. Same, I have a deeper understanding for the role of the media than I would be, and so on and so forth. I mean, it can be other sectors in society, but but there's the opposing view. If you are meddling in too many things, people are often saying, and you don't get good in anything. You're just sort of, on the surface meddling. I don't think I've quite been there. I've actually been kind of in the performing arts along with everything else for the last 30 years. But I really do feel that it makes me a better manager of this particular network because I have this background. Mm-hmm.
And you develop this type of like structural empathy for whoever you meet, for the different hats. When we were meeting the mayor of Varna, it was visible for me that you, like, it's not that you switched, but you had the right tools for the right situation. And then when we're speaking with the cultural sector, it was the same also, but with different skill set that was going forward.
Yeah, I do put on different hats depending on the situation that I am in. And
It's so useful.
And I feel it is always better, whoever you are meeting, to try to go down on a human level with them.
Yeah.
And you cannot go down on a human level with a person without at least trying to understand the person. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you are just speaking without understanding. Mm-hmm. And in my experience, that really doesn't lead to anything.
No, especially if you're trying to create some sort of partnership or institutional understanding, because in most of your shoes, that's what you need to do. You need to kind of make people talk to each other, understand each other better, fund some stuff, like the things that we're trying to do now in Varna is more or less make sure that the cultural sector, the municipality, the international community, and the artists all see eye to eye. And that's really difficult if you just don't see the people in between those institutions.
Yes, and partnerships, whichever the partnerships are, successful partnerships, in my experience, only are successful when you're able to go beyond this formal situation and forge real, genuine relationships where people are aiming for the same goal. Mm-hmm. That's how I've always...
Yeah, I agree. That's, I think, the only challenge in my experience is that if you want to really do it the proper way, it takes a lot of time. Mm. And we tend to be always late with everything socially, like when we have any type of social cultural process, it's always like, this should have been done 10 years ago, it should have been done 20 years ago. But then if you want to really do it the proper way, it takes time. And I think I've already said this joke in another episode, but it's my favorite HR/management/leadership joke, that you cannot make 9 people have a baby in 1 month.
That is a very good joke, and that is very
I'll
true.
say it again. But the thing is, sometimes things take time, and you cannot just pressure everything to happen. And there's things that you just need to take your time with them, and you need to make people learn about themselves, get to know themselves, like or dislike them, because you never know that maybe digging deeper can also create a bit of a boundary sometimes. But you need, especially in those political process, and we'll also go more into politics and how now the different right wing, centrists, and left wings are not talking to each other, and they're in a way denying the existence of each other, and that's also not productive for citizens or for parties, I think.
No, and it is why people have lost their faith in politicians. Because the polarization which we see everywhere in society, and it is not just between citizen and politicians, it is in the smallest sectors. I mean, it can happen in any type of situation, and there is this great tendency to look at yourself and your own will and your own rights as the sort of main thing without the consideration for the other, which I think is one of the founding causes of this polarization. And then, now I'm going off track a little bit here, Maya. Maybe you're going to have to cut this a little bit.
The track is where we put it to the houses, don't worry.
Yeah. No, but what I meant to say is that by not putting oneself in the steps of the other. I have a little saying that my mother from Colorado gave me: never judge your neighbor unless you have walked 2 miles in his moccasins. I think this is an old First Nation wise words. And there's a lot of First Nation people that live in Colorado, which is, if you do not try to understand the other point of view, you will never get anywhere. And if you just always focus on your own and your own priorities and your own trials and your own challenges without seeing the bigger picture of those that are around you, it just leads to a polarized world. It leads to a polarized society. And this friction between, which, I mean, it's a generalization, but I see it as a friction between 2 worlds. I see it as a friction between the world that I align to, of a progressive, as I call it, environmental minded, inclusive world, where we are all agreeing that we have a responsibility towards all of humankind, and those that are in dire strait, whether it's caused by droughts or wars or famine, it is a joint responsibility of ours to take care of it. This is how this is my global outlook. But we see and more political movements rising in our backyard here in Belgium, as well as everywhere around us, which has a really opposite view, in my opinion, that in particularly through immigration policies, want to force a European frontier on one hand and national frontiers that do so out of fear for the unknown, out of fear for somebody else coming to take their jobs, out of fear for changing of the fabric of society, with racist tendencies, looking at people's color of the skin as a main cause of concern. So these are the sort of two sort of worlds which I think are everywhere around us, and I think we in the arts bear an equal responsibility as anybody else in the sector of really not wanting to recognize it, shying away from it, and not taking the conversation.
It's an uncomfortable conversation.
It is an uncomfortable conversation, but we have to go there. We cannot keep on pretending that this has nothing to do with us when all around us, I mean, look at the new government of the Netherlands. Now there's a government being formed here in Belgium. Look what we have in France, although it's been diverted for a while, but it's still there. We cannot just shy away from this. So this is where I think, coming back to ITM, ITM's role in society was formed in 1981. It's one of the oldest and largest such cultural networks in Europe and possibly the world. And it's always been a place where progressive ideas are discussed and new ideas and innovation forged. That's been the role of ITM, is to come up with alternative models, not be afraid to enter into the difficult conversations, and really try to be a progressive challenge and be a progressive force in the arts community. And to me, and we have not done enough to address what is going on around us, which is why I think this is something that we should more and more be turning our attention to in the coming years.
Because you said that you exist in a form where you challenge the status quo in a way, but you also support growth. And then this has been going on for over 40, how many years? 50 years?
1981, so I
45-ish, something like that.
43 years old this year.
That's a good age for a network. So, yes. And it's what was visible for me, it was that it didn't matter whom I talked to between you and then Pipa and then with Vesco, the board members. You really, when we speak about shared values, I could see that while talking with the different parts of your board. And I don't know if that was just a lucky coincidence that I was participating in, but it was really visible that you practice what you preach, the way that you travel, the way that you see sustainable development. So let's go a bit into the network. What do you do? Why do you do it in the way that you do it? And but let's focus on that. What do you do as a network?
So we are an international organization, which is a membership organization. That's what all these European and international networks are. We are a membership organization, which means that performing arts professionals, everything from individuals to the largest institutions, decide to join IATM as members. And we currently have 567 members in 63 countries, I think it is.
Oh, okay.
With actually almost 2,000 employees in 77 countries, because a lot of our members are international organizations themselves, which are running operations all around the world. So we are quite a large membership organization. And because we are such a large membership organization, our influence and our dialogues go well beyond the membership. So you could say that we are one of the sectorial representatives on a global level as an organization, which means that we take the role of furthering the agenda of the performing arts, furthering the position of the performing arts, working to improve our place in society, but also address the ills which we as a sector face, and try to come up with innovative ideas and developments of how to do that. And we do it in very many ways, and I'll give you one example. One of the things that we've been working on and focusing on in the last year has been the working conditions of artists and changing of funding programs.
Okay.
We have been identifying gaps in funding programs, but we've also been identifying improvements that could be made, in particularly when it comes to the agendas of sustainability and inclusion.
Okay. And can I just interact with the question now. Like, have you, while assessing that whole frame of the working condition of artists, is this still an issue everywhere, or are there regions where this is in a way the conditions are good? Because I have heard a lot of complaints about that.
Yeah, there are very different conditions depending on where you look.
Okay.
In Europe as well as globally.
Mm-hmm.
And one shoe does not fit all in this regard, which is why we have tried to, in this whole European dialogue about the working conditions of artists, which has been going on, we have been trying to point out the international point of view, because we are an international network.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just going to explain the way we work by focusing on the funding programs, because it's quite interesting what has happened. We have, before COVID, started working on how can funding programs be improved? How can there be a better collaboration between the sector that receives the funding and the funders? Mm-hmm. How can the programs be more aligned to the nature of the work of the artistic organizations? So we have been commissioning researches of different types. We've been asking scholars and researchers and artists that are thinkers to really try to think outside of the box and come up with other alternative models. Mm-hmm. So this is one thing that we have done, which we then bring out through our meetings, whether they're online or in our plenary meeting like we had in Sofia. We try to roll out alternative ways of thinking. That's what I mean about ITEM being a place of provocative ideas and new models. Mm-hmm. At the same time, because of COVID, the funding sector got much more recipient towards new ideas, mm-hmm. because they anyway had to shift everything around. So we were just really lucky to have been already thinking about this before COVID, because the receivers of the ideas really started thinking on their own. So we really were doing this at the right time. Then at the same time, we had the good fortune, along with 5 other networks, to get the mandate from the European Union to start Perform Europe, which is a special European funded program for the performing arts, for performing arts organizations, to create collaboration projects across borders, touring, as we call it in the performing arts, but ideas around inclusivity and sustainability. Okay. So those that were applying and have been applying, and we just announced last week the results of the new round of Perform Europe, all those ideas are partnerships between organizations across countries where they are practicing inclusive touring, whether it has to do with creating work for the disabled communities or with disabled communities, or whether it has to do with migrants or whatever topic under the inclusion agenda there is, as well as practicing new behaviors and models of green mobility, and putting the European Green Deal, so to speak, on the agenda. So we have often been lucky enough, along with others, because this is never ITM acting alone, of starting with ideas. We really should do a program for the performing arts where we can really showcase how we can work inclusively and sustainably. And we had the good fortune to get the European Union's interest and then support and funding in creating this program. So this is just one example of actual concrete work we do and actual concrete results that come of it.
Yeah, that's a great example. And it's an example that directly goes as an investment, as a life changer of the artists and the communities they support themselves. That's a great result.
And it's creating examples. It is creating examples all across the 40 Creative Europe countries, because this is Creative Europe and we have the 27 member states and then 13 other countries, where artists and organizations, festivals, venues, presenters are now in the next, from July 24 to November 25, going to be rolling out innovative ideas of how we can actually change the way we work when it comes to being inclusive, when it comes to green touring, when it comes to putting sustainability and the idea of the green transition on the stages of Creative Europe, and hopefully by doing so influencing minds of citizens, enlarging this movement, which cannot be stopped and should never be stopped, because otherwise we are doomed as a planet.
Well, on that note, I was really surprised and then amazed by the way that your organizations and your board members organize their travel plans around the globe. So, and I think that that's also a very concrete leading by example, because I think that many times we are very strong when we speak about sustainability on paper, but then it's actually a bit difficult to shift sometimes the way that you travel, the way that you eat, the way that everything. So can you walk me through how your network does that and how you do that? Because you sent me a really interesting screenshot of your trip between Varna, Constance, and Brussels.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot of how your network lives the values.
Well, I mean, you just have to walk the talk the best you can. That's, whether it has to do with green mobility or something else. If you're going to be preaching to people a certain value shift or a certain behavioral shift, you cannot just, behave in the opposite direction yourself. So that's one thing. So I decided for this particular trip, going from Brussels to Sofia and back, and also because I had the good fortune to travel to Romania and take part in an event after we were together in Varna, I decided to do it by train and bus. And I could do it because of the funding was possible, because I got support from the place in Romania to support this travel. I could do it because I have a fantastic team which was holding the fort while I was on a few trains with no internet connection whatsoever in the sweltering hot going through Transylvania. There were certain conditions that needed to be in place for me to do this. And it was a bit of a mind-blowing experience in many ways. I'm not going to say it was easy at all times, especially in the very, very hot weather with no air conditioning at all in some places. But I am very glad that I did it. I really learned a lot by doing so. And the main thing that I learned is that it's absolutely okay for us to travel, if we can, as more than half of humankind travels, because this is how most of us travel. It is only a very, very small percentage of us that is actually flying the world all the time. But I also learned that the conditions can be improved.
Yeah.
So at the end of my little Facebook post that I put on this little trip of mine, I made a little bit of a call to the European Union and those that are responsible for the European Green Deal, because the European Green Deal stipulates that the European Union should be carbon neutral by 2050. That is only in 26 years. It also states that no place and no person should be left behind.
That's the tricky part.
That is the tricky part, but it says so, and we better put our attention towards improving green mobility across Europe and beyond. And I also saw by experience that it is quite possible. I mean, some of the wonderful old trains that I was on in Bulgaria and Romania were fabulous. And the best train rides that I had were there. But improving a little bit the ventilation in summertime, it's possible.
It is possible. I'm laughing also because, I spend my students here traveling between my then boyfriend, now husband, where he was studying and where I was studying, which is, it's not that much of a distance, but it took us like half a day every time.
Yeah.
And I've spent my fair share of green traveling, even though I would never call my experience green traveling. But I had like from fires to snow within my coupe. Like I've had so many stories of that. And I never, before I moved to Brussels, to me, traveling by train has become not an option. I'll be very honest, because I've spent so much time traveling in trains. And if it's a one like type of experience, it's an adventure. But then if you have to do that every Friday and every Sunday, you start to hate it because it's so uncomfortable.
Yes.
And then when I it was not moving to Brussels, I think it was before that, but like traveling to Western Europe and seeing that there are like different types of trains. I'm not even talking about like these ultra fast between Paris and Amsterdam, like the regular train to Zaventem. It's just different. And I remembered, I was like, okay, you can do train like that. I never considered it because there was just a part of my brain that closed that opportunity of me traveling by train because I hated it so much. And I understand that that's not the right attitude if you want to have sustainable green traveling, but it's also the place where we need to meet the citizens and their like well-being in a way.
Totally,
not even
absolutely.
Comfort. Like,
this is why there needs to be a European investment plan in green mobility. And it does not only have to do with trains. It has to do with a lot of other conditions. But I also want to say that, and as I said, some of my best train rides were in Romania and Bulgaria because it is also a much more sort of slower pace, warmer pace, more kindness. I met more kindness from train conductors and wardens there than I did elsewhere. Train travel through Germany can, for example, be extremely stressful because of many changes, because of delays, which means that you miss your next one and so on and so forth. And that happened to me a lot. Actually, my first night train that I was going to take from Brussels to Vienna didn't turn up. And I ended have to sleep in a seat for my first night. So, there are problems all over. It has nothing to do with Eastern Europe or the Balkans. Not at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but what I wanted to say that, because you asked that, why we do the things we do, IITM has decided to be at the forefront of this dialogue. We approved a very strong environmental policy last year, which puts us on our toes in this regard. I was not obliged to take the train. We have a policy of that it's so many hours and then you have to take a train. This was way beyond that. But it changed this mindset. It has changed the mindset of us that work for IITM. It is starting to change the mindset of those closest to us. And we really see a change of mindset happening in the network and beyond. And that is also part of the sort of campaign that we have created around this whole topic of green mobility and sustainability, is that we are really trying to forge change all across the network and beyond. How that is going to be possible is very much going to depend on the conditions of people. And this is the key point. The conditions are very unequal. We that live here in Brussels can take the train or use green mobility options to a large extent. Those that live on the outskirts, on the peripheries, can't. So we cannot, this is again, not one shoe fits all. We have to come up with solutions which are versatile, which take people's conditions into account, which take financial conditions into account. And we also have to maybe start looking at those that have never been able to travel and rather give that option to them instead of us.
That's a radical. I think in a lot of ears that would resonate as a radical proposal.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. I was thinking when you started your walking through your story of I was imagining you as a small girl going with the globe and thinking how you want to travel and how you want to see the world, and now connecting this to now and how you traveled half of the continent by train and by bus. That must be a nice, like, satisfactory experience for young Ása as well. I mean, not only for the political figure that you are,
but there's nothing heroic about it, though, and that I want to stress. Because, like I said, this is how more than half of humankind travels. And I think it is better for us to go in those shoes instead of staying up in the air like we are used to and taking a plane without thinking about it. So it was an experience. I am glad I did it. It seems to have set examples, but I am not the only one. There are multiple examples of artists and professionals, as well as people from other sectors, that have really made the commitment to not fly if they can. But we have to take into consideration not everybody is in that position. Like, for example, our members in Latin America. There is no way that they can even travel between their countries without flying. There is no public transport available in very many parts of the world. There isn't a system like we have built in Europe. We are so fortunate, and therefore it is our role as a European Union and beyond to set those examples. And therefore I really feel a strong European investment plan in green mobility is needed now, because we cannot leave it up to the member states and we cannot leave it up to the private sector to force that change.
I think it's really interesting, because when I was structuring this conversation, I was thinking we'll go so much more into arts and culture, and I really enjoyed it. We're going within the sustainability world and how also the place of sustainability is in each sector. It's not only like sustainability is its own sector in a way, but it's also a horizontal priority in all of the different sectors. And to see that you're working with the European Union on this program, then on setting an example for your network, for your partners, I think that's a great step towards visibility of sustainability, because it's not only trains. It's many more.
It is every single organizational as well as individual behaviors which are at stake and need addressing. And I am not a perfect example either as an individual. For example, as an Icelandic, the only option for me to go home in summer is either to take a plane or to take a boat which goes from the northern tip of Denmark, stops in the Faroe Islands and goes to the east of Iceland. It takes me approximately 12 days to get home that way. So
your vacation is over by the time you reach home.
Yeah, kind of. So, I mean, I am flying next week to go and meet my family and go to my little hut. But because I'm Icelandic and because I always have to fly there, my flight guilt has reached its highest point. And therefore, because I then am working and living on the continent, I see it as my responsibility to use every possible means to practice green travel.
To be thoughtful for everything else that you can actually control.
Yes.
I want to dig in deeper with you being Icelandic, because it's such an interesting place to grow up. I've been once for like 2 weeks, and everything that happened to me there was different from everything else that has happened to me traveling. I've been to, like, at this point, I think 40 countries, really a lot of countries. And Iceland was really different, like in many ways.
Give me an example.
I don't know how, like, it was like being in a different setting of how people are. That's, I think, the definition. So everyone had a very delicate, in a way, warm, but yet I don't know how to explain it. Everything that was happening to me, I was like, I've never had that before. That has never happened to me as well. For example, when we're doing our car insurance, the fact that we needed to have extra insurance because the wind would take the doors away, like things like that.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. When I've the ice that you randomly see in a lake, like I've seen that on postcards. We had something, a bit of an accident, and there people came to help us out, and everything I thought I knew stereotypically about how Nordic people are distant, things like that, that was never the case.
But we are the Latinos of the North.
You are the Latinos of the North.
Take that into account.
I was invited to, so one of the colleagues who was hosting us there, they invited us to a great dinner. I had the bat fish, which not the bat, I'm sorry, the fish.
Yeah.
And then I drank this. I did everything. And everything
that.
Yes,
yeah.
I did. The point is that everything that was happening to me, I mean, I went a bit with my privileged hat of, I've traveled so much, nothing can surprise me anymore. And I spent my 2 weeks there being surprised. Like, it's everything, the weather, the people, the scenery of it all, the food, how expensive it is. Yes, everything was just on top of and I was like, okay, I was surprised again today. Tomorrow, I'm also surprised. Then the next day, I was also surprised. So.
But was it a good feeling?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it, and I've been planning to go back, and I've been bugging my husband to go and like rent a camper and just go around the Golden Ring again. And yeah, I loved it, and we were outside of Reykjavík for a while, so we also went to different kindergartens because that was what we were exploring. It was how young children and disability and educational system interact in Iceland. So I've met, what I mean is I didn't only met like Icelanders who are traveling and getting used to foreigners. I met a lot of people who are just like teachers who are living in Iceland and being in their own bubble. And this was what really was, yeah, I loved it. So
I'm glad you had a good experience.
Yeah, it was. And I'm trying to go back, but I went there before the pandemic. And then for 2-3 years, nobody was going anywhere.
Yeah.
And then now I think that I'm ready to go back with my family to go around.
Well, I'll certainly give you good tips of not being as expensive as it is, which it is. It's very expensive.
I'm interested, how is it? Because to me, it looked very different from what I'm used to. And I'm wondering, is it for you that everything else is very different from what you're used to in Iceland?
No, I think humans are to a large extent, humankind is humankind, and we all have very similar emotions and feelings and desires and fears. So from the point of on a human level, I don't. However, I think one of the things that makes us a little bit different is that there's so few of us. We are under 370,000. I think it's 367,000 now.
A large family.
So we're not even 250,000. Somebody once told me that we're like a street in Liverpool. So we are brought up from a very early age that because there's so few of us, you need to contribute. Everyone matters. And you therefore need to be versatile. You need to start contributing from a very early age. I got my first job when I was 8 years old.
8?
Yes, I was babysitting my next door neighbor. And but we are used to doing many things, wearing many hats, which is why, as I told you, this thing that I have done, media, banking, politics, arts, it's not an unusual thing. Many people have similar sort of paths because you are
what needs to be.
Yeah, you are. There's so few of us that we need to contribute in very many levels. And then we are blessed with this beautiful country of ours, which is quite large, in particular when you consider the population.
Mm-hmm.
So we are used to having a lot of space. We are used to having the middle of Iceland, which is wilderness, where nobody lives. And even if people don't go there, which less and less have not been there at all, but still, even if you don't go there, it's there.
Yeah.
So you have this feeling of the vast land. You have this feeling of this wonderful place, which you have been given responsibility to take care of. And I have been fortunate enough to travel across it on foot mainly, but also driving with my friends in their jeeps in all directions. And I have really learned to appreciate the beauty of my country, but in particular my responsibility of taking care of it. Because it is one of the it is probably the largest wilderness in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
There is no other place, I believe, in Europe that has such vast, large, untouched land as we have. And this knowledge of this land that we have and knowledge of being so few has very much shaped us as a nation. The weather has also shaped us as a nation, because although we are experiencing very unpredictable conditions all across the world these years and decades, all due to carbon emission and the climate crisis, Icelanders have experienced it from way, way, way back, because we live in the far north. We are a tiny little island in the Atlantic Ocean, and we are very much shaped by weather conditions. And there are times where we have really asked ourselves, why do we live in this place? Which sometimes can have horrific conditions week after week. I remember when I had my younger child, we were living in Ísafjörður in the far north, and I literally did not go out for 6 weeks. There was just a snow blizzard going on all the time.
Wow.
But then the sun comes out and it changes everything, because it is a country of extremes.
Mm-hmm.
And the good weather is also extreme. It goes beyond anything. The light is beyond anything. The light nights in summer are beyond anything. So it is a country of extremes, but it's also a country of very strong generosity, I would say. I think that is something that I would say still is a characteristics which many people meet, and I'm very glad to hear that you met it. So yeah, it does shape us, and it certainly has shaped me and made me in many ways who I am. But so has my privileged positions on having been able to meet and become friends with people from all over the world, go to their places, their homes, and gain a deeper understanding about their way of life and conditions and the challenges that they meet. And it only makes me feel more humble for my privilege as an Icelander. I mean, just the value of the Icelandic passport goes beyond anything.
Yeah.
It is never questioned anywhere in the world. You hand in your Icelandic passport in Rio de Janeiro, and the costume guy, you're the first Icelander I meet, and he just greets you with a smile. That is a very different experience from the Kenyan or the Chinese or whoever it might be. So we are very, very fortunate people.
Mm-hmm. I think that there is also a sense of resilience that I see in people who come from like tough climates, let's put it like that. And I'm not sure if that's something that you can see in yourself or in your leadership style. Like, do you consider yourself a resilient person?
Probably so, yeah. I do, yeah.
And how does it, because I'm trying to figure out how does you being from Iceland shows in the way that you manage the organization, in the way that you lead. Do you think that it matters?
I mean, yeah, I mean, my characteristics and the way I lead ITM are certainly shaped from where I come from, but so would anybody else's who might also be from a place of harsh conditions and so on. So I don't think it's a unique thing, but I do think through having had a lot of experience in my life, having had to work very often under quite intense pressure, it has taught me resilience. I think the way I lead is by acknowledging that leadership is always teamwork. Being a leader is not a one-man show or a one-woman show. It is always done through a collaborative process of people that have been chosen to work in a certain place or be on the board of a certain organization. It is a joint effort. Icelandic is full of proverbs, and we have one proverb that I always wanted to find a way of translating well into English, and the direct translation is to be at the front of equals.
Okay.
If you see what I mean, that is how I see myself in ITM. I am at the front of the organization. I am the one that people come to, but I am at the front of equals. And the team of ITM is together the group that makes ITM what it is today, runs its programs, its activities, and achieves its goals through a joint effort.
How do you keep yourself accountable as a leader? I think that's very difficult sometimes when you have a lot of daily things going on, but you need to, because you have the self-reflection that of course you follow of how you are with people and how your team is and how your network is, but how do you make sure that you are going where you should be going and not being stuck in the daily routine and getting shortcuts somewhere?
That's a very good question. I often feel that I am getting stuck in the daily routine, and sometimes I feel a whole week has passed and I'm not, doing what I should actually be doing.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So
but you were busy.
I was good. I was busy doing something. I think one of the good things that I have is that I have quite good listening skills.
Okay.
I am a very good listener, and I really look at it as my main role in the organization is to listen to others, listen to my team, listen to the stakeholders in ITM, which are many. And that's one of the characteristics of networks like ours, that it's very non-hierarchical. And members have, fortunately, very many entry points into having opinions about the things that we do. And they certainly do voice their opinions.
Which is a sign that there is a safe space for opinions, which is great.
I hope so. I hope so. There is always, however, an expectation which cannot be filled at all moments because there are so many expectations, and there's no way a small team in Brussels can achieve all the things that the different types of members or groups of members would like to see happening. So there is always a long list of ideas which we do not achieve. So we try to set an agenda. We do that in collaboration with the board of ITM, but also we are very much working, and that's maybe important to say, is that the European networks are very much working with the European Union and receiving funding from the European Union. And that funding is achieved through a goal setting by the European Union. So we are applying for funding under certain conditions. So, I mean, part of the green agenda of IATM, although we certainly want to be there, is because that is an obligation by the European Union to be there. So there are certain parameters of activities that we are within, you could say. But I think listening skills is key to being a good leader and understanding the different points of view the best you can. Try to be transparent as much as possible. And then my little special Icelandic thing, which some people think is too much, I am a very direct person. I say things as they are. And I have a problem with people that cannot say things as they are, that are constantly beating around the bush, that are sort of putting hidden accusations and hidden messages and sort of egoistic innuendos and so on and so forth. This is what I have the biggest problem with as a leader in an organization, is all these sort of different ways of addressing things. So I think, listening, being transparent, being open, always answering whatever question is posed to you in the best possible way, and then try to help people further their agendas, also by giving them ownership of their agendas. Because as a membership organizations, members have the ability to do a lot of things. They can, for example, start a working group on whatever they want to do tomorrow. They just send an email to the office and say, we want to start a working group on an artist working group, or a producer's working group, or a working group about decolonization, or whatever they want to do. So there's a lot of maneuvering space to have to influence the agenda of IATM and bring ideas into the network, but they need to take charge themselves. They cannot expect the office to do everything for them. We are not many enough to do so. We are just a few. And we already have a large program to run.
I think that this is a very good explanation of how delegation and sharing power, so the whole empowerment process is decentralization. More or less, it's sharing the power that you have.
Yes.
And this requires a really healthy, confident recipient on the other end. It's not only you giving the power, but it's also the network being able to take and use and share that power.
And take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
That's where I think the key lies in all successful teamwork, whatever the team might be, whether it's a team of 2 or a team of 500. If you are going to be part of a movement that is going to force change, you have to take responsibility for it. What is it? A network is only as strong as the weakest link.
Yeah.
Isn't that the saying? If there is constantly always these doubtful voices or unspoken words or innuendos and accusations that are happening regarding any mission we are on, if you do not work together and you do not try to find, despite of different opinions, the thing that we can actually join forces around, then you will always be, in
the least efficient.
And going in different directions. And this is where I think also this fractured society and this polarized world that we find ourselves within, and we certainly find ourselves here in Europe within, when we look at the political landscape. I think we have a responsibility towards it. I think we have been asleep. I think we have allowed these developments to happen unprovoked. We have not challenged the far right-wing dialogue and rhetoric in the way we should have. Though for those of us that are against it, of course, there's people in the arts that think this is the way we should go, that we should close the frontiers of Europe, and that we should stop immigration, and that we should, go back to the old ways of living and thinking and doing and behaving, that we should deny the climate crisis and the heating of the globe. There are a lot of these voices, but we have not confronted it heads on.
Yeah.
We have not entered into enough dialogue as an arts sector with these far right politicians, which have now been elected to the European Parliament and are going to decide the fate of, for example, organizations like ITM, if they're allowed to.
What's your explanation of why this conversation never happened? Is it because in a way we thought we were a bit better and that's just not a serious movement? Or is it because we were just like, it's under my dignity to just speak with people who are that thinking like that? Because I've heard both and I never agreed with that. And I've spent my fair share of time speaking to people who are from the right wing. When I had to get something politically, when I had to convince them, Have you been
successful?
Yeah.
Good. And how did you do it?
Honestly, I did it in the exactly same way that I did it with the people that I sympathize with, who are from the left wing. And it's not an easy response, but it doesn't, like, politically, if you just see that without your own bias of, I think that policymaker is stupid because he thinks that blah, 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 blah. No, I wouldn't go in a meeting like that because I don't want anyone to get in a meeting with me having the hat.
So it's about respecting the opponent.
It's about respect, and it's about just being very clear of what you want. Because at the end of the day, if you're speaking to a city council member or deputy minister or whatever, they're there to do a job. And a lot of what is said during campaigns is for the campaigns. And when you actually go and you are in a position to do a job, whatever, city council, member of parliament, you actually have so much work that I think that not a lot of what is said in the campaigns can be taken into that. That's my experience. I may be...
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly recognize this, but I think you really hit the nail on the head. You have to respect your opponent. Whoever your opponent is, whoever it is that you are meeting, you have to have respect for that point of view, and you have to be able to listen to it and take it in.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, though, Maya, that we have a growing number of far-right politicians all across Europe that are on a mission. That are on a mission to change the way this continent of ours works and is and thinks. You only have to look at the maneuverings of Orban in the US yesterday to see that, for example. Or the political party that Marine Le Pen in France represents. So what I think is that we have to face our own complacency. I think we've been complacent. When I say we're asleep, I mean we've been complacent. We did not believe a movement like this could rise again in Europe. But if you look at the history of the last 100 years, you will see that these movements have risen. After the First World War, in the Weimar Germany, in the time between the First and the Second World War, this complacency happened. And people like Adolf Hitler were managed to seize power. And there was a reason why that happened. So I think there is a combination of emotions on one hand and actual political mistakes and complacency of us as citizens and us as professionals that has brought us to this place. And I think, I'm not a pessimist, I'm an optimist. I still believe very strongly in the European project. I still believe very strongly that we can save our planet. But we have to roll up our sleeves. And we have to stop shying away from the hard conversations that we need to have with those that are actually our opponents. And most importantly, we as sector need to find our solidarity, because we see polarizations in every little corner of society.
Yeah.
And people are finding the ills, the small things that they are annoyed about, and overlook the bigger pictures of how we need to stand together if we're going to actually change things.
Is there, you're saying polarization, so how does polarization look in arts? What does that mean?
Well, the sort of generalization is that those that are want us to go back to traditional way of running the art sector, and
So a bit more
traditional way of making art. I mean, there are those that you can, whatever sector you want to take, the visual arts sector or architecture. We have a politician in Iceland that has been proposing that we start building buildings in Reykjavík the way they were built at the turn of the 20th century. That those are the most beautiful buildings, and we should really just go back to the way our primary architect of that time, Guðjón Samúelsson, built this building, because that is what he thinks is beautiful. That this modern architecture is grim and ugly and cold and just not. And we should just have paintings on the walls of the museums and not strange sculptures or performance work or installation that nobody understands and nobody can buy. You just have beautiful things on your walls, not something that is going to provoke you every day.
Oh, that's horrible.
So, yeah, I don't know. Does it answer the question?
Yeah. It answers the question. To me, I've always, there is an echo in my head of a conversation that was, I'm not sure what was the position of the person who said it, but she for sure was occupying a public position. And it was again about a process in Bulgaria for the cultural field. And there was this woman who said that painting should just look nice and beautiful, and that there should be a committee on that. Yeah. And the thing is that is also, I think, very triggering for people who are coming from communistic background, because we had committees for everything else. Exactly. And there was art which was bad because it was from the West. There was music which was bad, and people had to hide and listen to it. And I was born 4 years before communism fell apart. So the only thing I remember is kindergarten, and that everyone was wearing these weird gray dresses, which I'm not sure if it was in every kindergarten, but that's my mindset, that just everything was so controlled. And to hear somebody in 2022 or 3, when that was said, to want a committee on art, to me that was why would you want that? Just, if it's so bothering to you, don't look at it. But why would you want somebody to control what can be considered art or good art? That to me is polarizing, for example.
But this is a great example, because this tells it all. It is this viewpoint that everything was better the way it was back in the day, whatever it might be.
Whatever day.
Whatever day that might be, which can be different things in different places.
Yeah.
It is this thing about something being which provokes, is inspiring provocations in society, is inspiring activism, is inspiring political art, which is a very predominant thing in contemporary arts, whatever art form there is, because artists are activists like anybody else in society decides to be activist. So this example of this person, and especially the idea of it should be decided in a committee, that's whoa.
No, to me that's that, and I fear that if people like that go into power, they will do things like that because they believe they're right. And I think that this is mainly why we really need to speak to each other, because I'm sure that this person can actually be convinced that they're wrong, because I think that they're wrong. But the moment that this conversation is publicly shared, that there is this plan as from somebody who is in politics, that to me is really scary, because I can see that being implemented in a social context, in a women or men context, in a marriage context, like in every, like if you just give up your power, freedom of expression and delegate it to whoever, to me that's the end of society. That's how I see it. And it, through art, of course, you will not feel it immediately the first day, but you will feel it. And I think that you will feel it very deep in your soul, because the arts is the way that you express yourself, what you like in arts as well, because I'm not an artist, but what I choose to see in arts is how I see the world as well.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And this manifests itself then in every other possible way, which is why these tendencies that we are seeing are not only scary, they are dangerous, and they have the ability to take away the fundamental rights which we have been fighting for hundreds of years. And we're talking human rights.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking the rights of women. We're talking about the freedom of speech. And we're talking about artistic freedom. And the list goes on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it all goes back to identity and how our identity is interlinked to create a society, because we have, in a way, voluntarily agreed that this is the way that the world functions better, is we being together.
Yes.
All of us.
And for us Europeans, who have had the good fortune to been born and raised in a time when the European Union came to existence. I think the European Union is the most fantastic democratic exercise that has ever been created on earth. And I stand by that opinion forever and ever.
Mm-hmm.
But it is being threatened from all fronts. And we have a joint responsibility to safeguard it and protect it and support its progression forever and ever and ever.
I totally agree with you. And to me, one of the really good arguments of is it the European Union a good or a bad idea is that every criticism I've heard for the European Union starts with, well, it's not perfect. And I don't believe that anything is perfect.
What is perfect?
It cannot be perfect, but it's quite damn close to it being really good. And I think that there are many gaps, especially when it comes to this cohesion policy approach that they have between the East and the West and the North and the South, because it's really different in the different corners of the EU.
Totally.
And it should be considered when you do policy making, and it should be considered when you create like continental initiatives such as the Green Deal, because the Green Deal in the south of Bulgaria and in the north of, Finland look very different, like really, really, really different. So, but still, having said that, you cannot remove the fact that it has fundamentally changed the way that most of the countries on the continent work.
It is the most greatest but faulty, let's put it that way, democratic exercise that has ever been rolled out. But where has democracy been perfect? Do you have any example of a perfect democracy?
No. And it's
do you have a better idea of how to run the world? Is it through totalitarianism or so to me, when the European Union is created, I will go to its defense always. And I have had the privilege living here in Brussels to experience it in action.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way the policy making is framed through the institutions, certainly there are improvements to be made. But I think it's a fascinating thing to take part in.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, and I think that this is also partially the role of networks such as the one that you lead, to be this type of valid place for feedback for what the institutions are missing. Because I think that they're missing a lot.
We're an active player in the policy making. And that is what is the unique beauty of the trust that has been forged between civil society and the European institutions, is the multiplied entry points that we have to enter into the dialogue, to bring ideas to the table, and to really with the support of the European Union, shape new models, shape new funding program, really put ideas for new developments on a European level on the table. And we are not only listened to, it is acted upon. So it is a wonderful example of a top-down meet the bottom-up grassroots, and then new, not perfect, faulty, but beautiful things come out of it.
It cannot be perfect because it's full of people, and people are not perfect.
Yes.
It can never be perfect.
No.
I'm now tempted a bit to go through this bottom-up, top-down journey, and I ask you to think of a story, like a transformative story that you can share, that the network that you lead had impact in any type of public process that you supported into developing. While we were in Varna, you said that there's so many examples of buildings that were reshaped in the way so cultural spaces can occupy them. So anything like that, I think, will be a great finale, because now we went through the different points of view of politics, the different types of EU challenges that there are. And I want to have this little thread of how ETM actually functions in all that mess, because it's a very complicated mess, European political mess that we function at.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ITM has in its 43 years of existence always been a vehicle for change. And that's what it should be. It is a place where great minds and newcomers and young professionals and older professionals and the whole spectrum of the performing arts can meet and discuss and provoke and work together on creating new ideas. And there are several examples in the history of ITM where new things have come up. For example, the whole idea of the co-production model in the performing arts, with different organizations coming together to support an artistic creation, putting money into it together, no matter where the artists are coming from, and then bringing it to European audiences or beyond Europe together. That's the co-production model. This was created in ITM back in the day.
Okay, I didn't know that.
As an example. I mean, of course, when I say ITM, it is the meeting point, whether it's the members or the non-members or whatever. But this whole model of working together across borders was definitely developed to a large extent in ITM. And since then, very many other things have been developed in ITM. And one of the things that I am the most proud of, if I may put something that we have achieved, I already talked to you about Perform Europe earlier, the new funding program. So that is something that we are very proud of. But it is our new program, Global Connect, which is now going on its 4th year, where we are really trying to live up to our reputation of being an international network and not just a European network, by running a program which invites strong performing arts professionals and leaders from the global south into the network. We give them a 5-year membership. We give them a whole program of 6 months before they come to a plenary meeting. And then they come to a plenary meeting, and then they become full-fledged ITM members and opinion makers and voices in the network. And this program now has brought us 43 fantastic professionals from all over the world. And this program has really changed the conversation in ITM, brought voices into the network that were missing, and really enriched the global conversations that we have to have. Because although we have been focusing on Europe to a large extent in this conversation, Europe cannot make the changes that we want to see alone. It needs to work with other continents, and we need to equally strengthen this conversation and this understanding between continents. And this is what ITM is doing through this program. It is just starting, many more years to come. But this is something that I'm very proud of having done, because ITM has been doing very many different things through the years, but this is an example of a program that I find has already proven its success, and it's neat, and it's really, really changing the face of the network in many, many ways.
Impressive. It's really impressive what you're doing. Well, I hope that this will be one of the key flagships that you have as a network from many, many more. And I hope that there will be a 50th great party somewhere that I'll get an invitation for.
Absolutely, Maya.
Okay, well,
You're an IHM friend now.
I am. I felt like a friend during that event, and it was nice.
And it was lovely to meet you in Mana, and it was very enriching for the group that went to Varna. I mean, we had 400 people coming together to Sofia, and then we were 20-something that went to Varna afterwards for a specific purpose to support the Varna artistic community in having a contemporary performing arts venue. And you could really feel the network at work in Varna, I felt.
Yeah.
Because there was like a mission and there was a task, and people had a lot of questions, but they also had a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
And I think the conversations and the generosity of the IHM members as well as the Varna community in these dialogues was wonderful to follow and listen to.
It was, and it was very enriching. And for somebody who is an outsider to the cultural and arts field, it was just very interesting. I sometimes, when we spend so much time in our own bubble, you kind of lose sense of what's happening in the world outside of your small world. And of course, what you were saying with the cross points of arts in politics and how human rights and sustainable development are the values that you're driven by as well. And that these are my values as well, but I've been exercising them in a different context. And it was so interesting just to talk to people who are like using different terms, like audience development, like things that I've never said in my life, audience development, before meeting you in Varna. So it was just and it's a lesson for me that sometimes I voluntarily need to really leave what I'm used to in order to learn. And I know, like, this cliche about the comfort zone, we all know it. We all think we're doing it. But I think that in practice, when you really have to go out of what you're used to and spend time with people that you're not familiar with and their work, it's just like...
It should be an obligatory thing. We should all, at one point in our career, that would be great, wouldn't it? If we had there was like this system where we could sort of, where we had to leave our bubble.
Yeah.
But the conditions to be able to enter into another one as well. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, bubbles tend to be closed. Bubbles tend to be difficult to enter. And we really...
And not always welcoming.
Yeah, no, but I think this comfort zone that you're talking about, we stay in our comfort zone because it is the place that we know.
Yeah.
And it is not easy to step out of it if you do not have the conditions to step out of it. I mean, I described my little Icelandic journey, but it's because I come from a place of so few people. So you have to go between bubbles there. Otherwise we, don't function.
It's not possible, yeah.
It's not possible. So so therefore it's a natural thing for me to do so. But when you live in a larger society where the entry points are not there,
or they're not there for you.
They're not there for you, or they are not even getting a good job in the culture sector in Brussels is hard. It is very hard. It is extremely competitive. So staying in the bubble is perhaps something which is absolutely essential and needed for a large portion of us. But it does not mean that we have to stay in the conversation. I mean, we don't have to leave the sector and go somewhere else. But we really need to work on enlarging these conversations and reaching out to other sectors in society. which is why I think IHM's journey, which has been largely about sustainability and greening on one hand, inclusion on the other, it has brought IHM to places that we would never think we would go to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for example, for myself, coming into this job 5 years ago, I had never put my focus on art and disability before.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a world which I have discovered since, which I find hugely important from an inclusion point of view. And I have seen fantastic artistic work being made by the disabled artistic community all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been such a missing part of our sector that I feel a very strong obligation to try to support it, just to give you one example. And there are so many.
Mm-hmm.
So by really addressing these universal topics, it really gives you an entry point into understanding, learning about, and gaining knowledge about so many different spheres of society which you otherwise would never have access to.
So we have to be brave, we have to be consciously searching, and we have to be open to and curious. I think curiosity is the key word of this conversation.
Totally. And we have to address the topics that matter for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're not a sector that should only concern itself with a certain type of art making. I mean, everything in society is a subject for artists and artistic creation.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very strong point, both for artists and for people who are consuming art. So I think that for a lot of the topics that I've worked with, I haven't really seen a lot of artistic expression on this. So for example, it's disability, of course, and art done by disabled artists. I think it's one, but then disability as a topic within art.
It is a very strong topic within art.
Yeah.
Yeah,
huge.
And more organizations are fortunately really understanding their responsibility in both creating conditions for disabled artists to be equal to participants in artistic creation, but also addressing it from the point of view of creating the conditions for disabled audiences to take part. As well as increasing the understanding of audiences in general towards the topic and the values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's in a way the future of the social in arts, the social dimension of arts, because that's the human dimension, and that's in a way, to me, how these all link is how can you fully express yourself and express your freedoms if you're denying the rights and the access of others to do the same. That's how I see this process when it comes to equality and representation of artists. It's like if you really want to have an equal representation, not only about artists with disabilities, but artists from marginalized communities and everyone, you need to have the space where everyone can do what they need to do.
We cannot speak about an inclusive society without speaking about how each sector in society is receiving all. It is about that.
Yeah.
It is about having the conditions for full participation by everybody. It's a social democratic notion, and it's a democratic notion. And at the end of the day, however, and you speak about social art and all these things, it is artistic freedom is the fundamental of it all. And we should never start trying to create a society that gives directives to artists like your Bulgarian politician was suggesting, and my Icelandic one as well. Because if we start going down that slippery slope, we are doomed. So, there are those artists that want to create art which cannot be defined and should not be defined. There are those that just feel the art for art's sake argument is still very valid. And then there are those that really look at art as activism, as political activism, as something which has a strong message to society. And then there's everything in between. And that is the beauty of working in this sector, because anything is allowed, anything is equal. It is just a question of taste and will and longing and how it's received. And then, this is, but what I think, and in my experience, these moments that I've had in my life as an audience member, where I am literally either brought to tears by either the beauty or the horror that I see on stage, or where I'm literally feel like I was hit by a lightning and a new idea was forged in my head due to whatever I was experiencing on stage. This is the magic that only the arts can bring to society. There is no place that can replicate the artistic stage. The in the moment discoveries that you as an audience member can enjoy and take in and bring back with you, and perhaps have it linger in your head for days and weeks and months, than the art in the moment on the stage. So this is this untangible, fantastic place which we have decided to create in society, whether it's the performing arts stage or the music stage or the visual art stage, it doesn't matter. And to me, art is like any other needed sector in society, which we have an obligation to offer to our citizen. I often use, some people have been protesting it when I use this allergy. It's like the sewer system. We have to have a sewer system in our cities, otherwise disaster will strike us. We have it as a service, and it's a needed service and system and condition which we decide to have. That's what is underneath our feet. We also equally need to have a service and a condition which can enlighten us, which can transform us, which can take us out of our little bubbly head and our isolations and really bring us somewhere else which we never could have imagined we would go. So these two things.
I love this allergy. I love it. I like it. The transformative power of art, to me, that I think I discovered that quite late in my life. I think I was in my late 20s or something like that, because I was used to, to me, art was, I would go to theater quite often. I would go to concerts, and I would go to galleries, but I don't know, there was this type of self doubt that I'm good enough to go to contemporary artists, and it was so rare where I was growing up that I didn't really have that access. The sewers were not functioning, so I didn't have that. And I remember a friend of mine kind of pushed me to go to an artist. His name is Ivo Dimchev, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forget the experience I had at that evening with this event. It was a mix of dance, singing, visuals, and a really impactful monologue. And it's like a core memory now. That
it transformed you.
Yeah, and it literally just opened the door that I actually can go to explore things that I absolutely don't have an idea of what they are, and the artists, and why they are created. And what I always had the idea that I need to plan what art will do to me. I'm going to this gallery to learn about blah, 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 blah. I'm going to see this theater play because
it's an educational experience.
Yes, I had I think it's a bit of all of the setting of how I was brought up to and how I expected art to be to me, if that makes sense.
I understand.
So that, but once you have that unlocked, it's like a level up. I think you become very adventurous with what you're up to as well, as an audience member. And I think that's also something that needs to be trained. It's like a muscle that you need to train with people to be regularly open to new experiences artistically.
But everybody can have this experience.
Yes. Yeah.
No matter who it is. And this transformative experience which you had at that moment empowered you in a way that you never knew because it happened in that moment, but it stays with you forever.
Yeah.
It cannot be taken away from you. This empowerment is Maya's from ever on.
Yeah. What makes you happy? I always have to ask questions for my guests. What makes you happy?
Many things make me happy. I love a good conversation like we have been having. That makes me happy. I love to cook for my friends. That makes me happy. I really, really love to give food to people and enjoy food with people.
What do you cook?
Everything. I have had cycles of different types of kitchen and cuisines in my life. I mean, I have like a repertoire of different things, but I have gone from Indian to Georgian to Italian. I mean, Italy always stays with me and everything in between. I also make up my own recipes. And I always change recipes. I never follow recipes to the
I could not see you follow your recipe.
No, I can't. I can't. So, I mean, I actually really enjoy the little things in life. Of course, I also love to come to a new place. And I mean, you know, walking towards the Taj Mahal was a fantastic experience. And coming to Rio de Janeiro was another fantastic experience. But actually, at the end of the day, maybe after a long day walking through the Icelandic highlands with everything on my back in pouring rain, and then when the sun breaks out and I sit down and I found a beautiful growth of wilderness flowers beside me, that perhaps makes me the most happy. So I actually think the place where I am the most happy is when I'm somewhere in the Icelandic wilderness, all alone or with my husband or with my friends, and we are just enjoying being the small people we are against this nature, but still empowered and content.
Wow, I can see you being with that backpack and the pouring rain. And what makes you hopeful for the future?
By people which are determined to work together for change. I really believe in the power of the individual, but even stronger, I believe in the power of the team. I really think teamwork and joint solidarity actions with a clear goal are which is the only hope we have, because if we do not continue striving for the needed change, then it will not go in the right direction. So this is what makes me hopeful, is when I really experience the power of the joint effort of people together.
Wow. Well, that's a great ending, I think, for a great conversation as well. Thank you very much for being here and for being the way that you are. And I'm really glad that I met you in Varna.
Likewise, Maya. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been quite a ride for me as well to go through all these things and sort of, you know, looking back and why am I the way I am and where are we going? And I really feel also that connecting with somebody from like you, which has gained so much expertise in another sector, is a very valuable thing for ITM and for us that work for ITM.
Wow, thank you. Well, I hope that it was as enjoyable for our audience as it was for us too to share this hour and something together. Thank you very much for staying with us, and yeah, soon we'll be back with another interesting guest to dig in deeper on leadership, power, empowerment, and the EU bubble. Until then, you can go back and see the previous episodes and like and subscribe and share the episodes that you like. And yeah, be kind, hug your dog, be a good person, go to the Icelandic wilderness. Thank you very much. Bye bye.